We're speaking with John Nichols of The Nation, author of Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers, Accountability for Those Who Caused the Crisis. You know, the one thing that we have noticed regarding the vaccine mandates, and especially on the conservative side that have rejected it synonymously, you know, we talk all the time that Medicare for all is the elimination of the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. I don't see how a message like that wouldn't resonate in the more conservative communities today. Because if you're even talking to, because again, the thing about Wisconsin, as you know, is it's a very libertarian red state. And so there is this belief that the government can't do anything right. Well, my argument is it's not government run healthcare we're advocating for, it's government funded healthcare where the healthcare works for us. I think that there could be a great opportunity here going forward. You know, in Florida, the only thing we ever seem to get right is our ballot initiatives. But I really think there is an opportunity here to really bridge the divide on the healthcare issue, because a lot of people are seeing over the course of this pandemic, and I really believe that the source of where the distrust on the vaccine comes into play is the for-profit motive that exists within private insurance and big pharma. Could you speak to that and what your thoughts are in terms of bridging that divide regarding universal health care, and how that, without question, would have mitigated a lot of the disastrous results that this pandemic ultimately resulted in?
I'm sorry, I don't have my button here to hit and go bingo, because you just nailed it. I mean, that's you hit on something there that I've been talking about a lot in interviews about this book. And that is, look, I have been talking, I've been on shows where I'll get callers who are vaccine skeptics, right? And I will say right up front, I am double vaccinated. I've got my booster. And when the next booster's coming, I'm front of the line there, elbowing people aside to get it, right? I'm all in. I'm down with the vaccines. But at the same time, I can just give you chapter and verse in the profiteering, in bad policies, bad approaches of big pharma. Now, that in itself creates a situation where there's a tremendous vulnerability because people are distrustful of a healthcare system that intersects with profit. And when you can point to such a high level of profiteering, it becomes very, very easy for people to say, well, are you sure we need these things? And we've seen a lot of that occur. And so you're exactly right. And we extend beyond the pharmaceutical companies to talk to the healthcare system about the healthcare system in general. The truth of the matter is, if we had a single payer Medicare for all healthcare system in the United States, there is simply no doubt in my mind that hundreds of thousands of people would have lived, who in this case ended up dying. Millions of people would not have been infected who did become infected, and tens of millions of people who suffered economic hardship and dislocation and difficulty as a result of this pandemic would have been in a much more stable place. And so I think that the pandemic showed so many of the vulnerabilities of our society. And one of the deepest vulnerabilities is that we don't have that single payer Medicare for all system. If we did, I think you're right, the skepticism would be far less. We would have a lot more people alive today, healthy today, in a functional place. And the one thing I always add to this too is that you do need a social welfare state as well. And the truth is that when I looked at countries around the world, and I interviewed leaders from countries around the world in working on the book, and what we came back to again and again is that countries that had a well-developed national healthcare system and a well-developed social welfare system were able to take a lot of the hits of this pandemic in that immediate moment, in that most difficult moment. And they also had the trust of their people. And experts will tell you, medical experts, ethics experts, all across the board will tell you, the most important thing in responding to this pandemic was trust in the government. Now, I'm not telling you that we should trust the government on everything. I've been critical of more governments in more situations than I could even count up. But what they're talking about is, in a situation of a crisis like this, an overwhelming moment, if the government says, look, you're going to need to wear a mask, or you're going to need to socially distance, or you're going to need to lock down, or you're going to need to get a vaccine, people are saying, yeah, I rely on this healthcare system. I trust the single payer system that we've got. I rely on this social welfare system. It does deliver. It does the things that we need. If they say this is necessary, yeah, I believe it. And in Germany, as a classic example, a country with which the United States would often want to compare itself. Germany, if you look at the level of death, in the overall population compared to the United States, it's minuscule. And in countries around the world, we just had a dramatically higher level of death as a result of this pandemic than other countries did. And when the Lancet did its study on the differences between the countries, what they determined was that in the first year of the pandemic, 40% of the deaths that occurred in the United States were unnecessary. Now, underline that, put a circle around that. Remember that 40% of the deaths, when we were talking in the range of 400, 500,000 deaths, what that means is we're moving into the hundreds of thousands of people who died unnecessarily. And I think you can trace an immense amount of that to our lack of a strong national healthcare system, to our lack of a social welfare system, and frankly, to our lack of a government that we can trust.
Yeah, it's a problem, and we don't trust them. I mean, yeah, and we shouldn't. But yeah, this was one of those times where it would behoove us to actually live somewhere where we knew our government cared enough about us to give us healthcare. See, that right there is all you need to know, is that we don't prioritize caring for the collective, and our government doesn't prioritize our healthcare. So even if they lie about a bazillion other things, we don't even trust our government on a vaccine.
And we've been very
okay.
And we've also been very adamant about the fact that within the purview of the executive branch, President Biden could declare a national health emergency and expand Medicare to everybody in lieu of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
People, and again, as you know, there's usually only two types of responses. That's BS and, well, it'll never work. And to me, it's like we've been trained to believe that we're not entitled to anything in this country. Like, we should just be grateful for whatever crumbs we receive, and let's not put too much pressure on elected officials. My goodness, it really is supposed to be the opposite. We spend so much time fighting amongst ourselves. We need to be pointing it in the direction where it belongs, not amongst each other. Once we unite as a people, that's when everything will change. But I really think right now, do you get the sense that there is sort of this collective uprising that's happening, that despite the fact that things have been obviously very dire in many ways, I think there's a lot of grassroots energy that's happening, especially amongst the labor movement? How do you see it right now?
Oh, I totally agree. And frankly, there has to be. I write about this a lot in the book because one of the things that was clear was that when this pandemic hit, the government, the people that were in charge of government, and in charge particularly of the regulatory agencies, were not going to save people. And remember that in one of the chapters in the book, one of the longest chapters in the book, is on Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation. Yeah. And you're thinking, like, why? Who's going to devote a chapter of any book ever to Elaine Chao? Well, the reason is that she was begged throughout the pandemic to issue a national mask mandate for public transportation. I mean, it's logical, right? You're getting on buses and planes, and the unions asked her to do it. The consumers asked her to do it. Everybody asked. She wouldn't do it. And then we had a Secretary of Labor, Scalia. Interesting that it's a Scalia running the Labor Department. And and there were so many things that he could have done to make workplaces more safe, but he didn't do it, right? So the government agencies that should have been in the forefront of doing something didn't act, right? And then you ask, okay, well then, luckily your benevolent employers will certainly take care of you. No, employers were literally firing whistleblowers. If somebody said people are getting sick at the Amazon warehouse or in the meat packing plant, they were fighting to keep unions out, the whole bit, right? And so you end up in this situation where what the pandemic revealed is that people desperately need not just unions, but very, very strong unions. They need union representation that is able to confront corporate and political power on behalf of working class people. And the simple fact of the matter is that if we had the level of unionization that we had in the 1950s in this country, or that some countries still have, we would have had far fewer deaths. It's as simple as that, because you would have had people in place who could have advocated on behalf of those workers and said that if the workers weren't protected, then we're pulling people out of here. We're going to strike. And what we should have understood, and what we should understand coming out of this, is Of course, the pandemic gives us a lesson on why we need a national healthcare system. Of course, the pandemic gives us a lesson on why we need a social welfare state. But there's a good argument to be made that the most powerful lesson of all is that we need a strong union, no matter where you're working, because even where people had union representation, we have beaten up unions so much in this country. We have undermined and weakened them so much that even where unions did advocate in good and effective ways, they were undermined, they were weakened to such an extent that they weren't always able to do what they needed to do. So again, I always make that point of we need unions, but we need very strong unions, much stronger than I think most Americans fully understand.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.